We're back with college football, and we're covering the college football playoff semifinal games. So let's go on to the game on Thursday between 7 seed Notre Dame and 6 seed Penn State. The game plan for this one was going to be simple. This is clearly a matchup predicated on the strengths of both the Notre Dame rushing attack and Penn State's defense. More specifically, their run defense in this one. Notre Dame hasn't been as effective in the passing game in most of their victories this season because they really haven't had to. They've ran teams out of contention in these different matches. So Penn State's goal in this one was to control the line of scrimmage. But they would need their own offense to step up as well. They're also a team predicated heavily on the rushing attack. And they would try to get Nick Singleton going early on their first drive. You get a solid 6-yard run and then get a pass out of the backfield for 23 yards before stalling out just a little bit. Then on 2nd and 9 on this drive, you would have Drew Allar throw such an inaccurate pass to Amari Evans. Even if he would have came down with the ball, there was a defender ready to light him up at the point of attack. And then they eventually stall out with a penalty and a 6-yard gain on 3rd and very long, leading to them punting the ball early in this game. The Notre Dame offense wasn't able to do much of anything on their first drive either. They picked up some yardage but had to punt in Penn State territory. And at the very least, with this, they pinned the offense back very deeply. So now you had Penn State getting yet another opportunity to try to assert themselves, but being backed that far into a corner, they only picked up a first down on this drive and had to punt from their own 20-yard line. On the last possession that finished within the first quarter, you would have Notre Dame getting the ball back. And this is kind of the theme for Riley Leonard's first half, I would say. He was very, just rattled, confused. You have to credit the Penn State defense with that. They got as much pressure on him as they needed to in different moments of time. And it certainly affected him here as he would throw an interception to Wheatley on Penn State's defense, giving Penn State a shorter field to work with, and eventually allowing them with their run game and with very short passes to tight ends and to running backs get into Notre Dame territory and kick a field goal. So that wasn't before a little bit of controversy, as on a 3rd and 4 play earlier in the drive in Notre Dame's red zone, Drew Allar would actually throw an interception, but they got called for defensive holding. And honestly, that one was warranted. So I understood that. Still, they subsequently gained just a single yard overall and had to settle. Notre Dame was still in a flux, though, despite a 12-yard run from Jadarian Price and another first down conversion for the likes of Riley Leonard. Still wasn't enough by the end of it. They were not going to get beaten over the top, and they were going to force them to settle for short play after short play. It was much harder, though, given how compressed their coverage was, to really go further than that. Just a 3-yard catch on 3rd down will force them to punt yet again. And with this opportunity, Penn State would take complete and total advantage as they would drive down the field with the likes of Kaytron Allen, with the likes of Tyler Warren, and with the likes of Nick Singleton. Eventually, he would rush for his first touchdown of the game and give the Nittany Lions a 10-0 lead. Now, with that, the Fighting Irish would have this final possession in the first half to work with. He would get the ball, Riley Leonard, to the likes of Aeneas Williams and Mitchell Evans for a first down before throwing an incomplete pass and then being taken out of the game due to him suffering a potential head injury. He was taken into the tent for the concussion protocol. And then came back up Steve Angeli, who had gotten, garbage time minutes over the course of the season. He barely played. And it's kind of a dire situation overall for them. You're on this person and having him take the mantle of being the quarterback on the field at this point when he's barely played. Everything is on the line. You haven't even scored yet. So now it's probably a little more difficult to get points on the board, knowing that that's the objective. But nonetheless, they try to push on. And on 3rd and 5, to his credit, he did throw a pretty good pass to Jordan Faison to pick up a first down. But then he fumbled the football as Dennis Sutton would force it. Luckily, his offensive lineman would fall on the ball and snatch it away from Penn State's defense just in time to give them another chance. He made the most of it. They got deeper and deeper into Penn State territory before ultimately having to settle for a Mitch Jeter 41-yard field goal. But ultimately, you got what you needed. You had points on the board. You had some momentum in your favor. And they would certainly ride that to start out the second half. I mean, their offense just started to win the line of scrimmage, and they started to take complete and total control of the game. It was all Jeremiah Love from this particular point. And then he would actually hit the likes of Aeneas Williams on a sort of wheel route for a 36-yard gain. Probably the biggest play of the game to that point. Riley Leonard, after another Aeneas Williams 15-yard run, would then take it upon himself and score a touchdown from 3 yards out to tie up the ball game. This is where Penn State's offense started to stall out completely. Once they started accounting for the Tyler Warren out route and accounting for him elsewhere, Penn State and Drew Allar had nothing to work with. I mean, quite literally, even in areas where it seemed like the man was contested well enough, he was still trying his absolute hardest to get it to that man. That's how, yes, I understand that Tyler Warren's that great, but he is literally their entire offense. And if you account for him, they can't do anything else. Notre Dame would stall out for just a little bit, though. And then Penn State would also punt again, despite having another shot to work with. Now, Notre Dame would get the ball back with 4 minutes or so left in the third quarter and would take up more time with the help of not just Jeremiah Love, but also Jaden Greathouse, a player who hasn't necessarily gotten a lot of attention for them. Had a solid game in the Georgia match, but not really one of their core guys. He would become really important in time, though. Jaden Thomas would then get involved for the offense and get an 18-yard run on a sort of sweep. Ultimately, with a penalty bringing them in closer to the Penn State end zone. It would be a situation where you know you're going to give it to Jeremiah Love. But Penn State's defense, to an extent, was ready for it. So Jeremiah Love gets the ball. He has to bounce it to the outside after shedding off a potential tackle. And then on the left side of the field, man has to take on 4 different Penn State defenders trying to tackle him. But he muscles his way through it, extends his arm out, and gets the rushing touchdown from 2 yards out to give Notre Dame the lead after being down 10-0, ripping off 17 unanswered points. That being said, even with that surge, Penn State would get right down to the brass tacks themselves. Tyler Warren would catch a 27-yard pass, and not just that, but was probably the deepest pass that Drew Allar threw on the night in terms of air yardage. Like, literally. It was over the top. I watched that play live. It was right over the top of the defense. Probably the deepest pass he threw. Like, even this next pass, or so, the next couple of passes that he would get to Dinkins were very short in nature. And Dinkins on this 20-yard catch had to run out into the flats himself. Like, that's all him doing the extra work he needed to do. After that catch, though, from the Notre Dame 18-yard line and on, the duo of running backs, who would be the only players in the FBS to get more than 1,000 rushing yards each, would finish off the drive. Katron Allen would get 11 rushing yards to eventually pick up a first down, and then Nick Singleton would muscle his way in for a 7-yard touchdown as well, doing his best to expose the defense. Now, let's just say that things got interesting for Notre Dame, because on the very first play of their next possession, Dennis Sutton would actually get out in coverage and with his tall frame managed to lurk Riley Leonard into making a stupid decision at a very inopportune time. Surely enough, getting an interception, giving Penn State another short field to work with, which to this point was definitely helping them out with a good portion of their scoring throughout the course of this game. There would be yet another situation where they would pick up a first down, and then you would have Drew Allar try to throw it deep, chucking it into the end zone, where it was picked off by, I think, the longest tenured player on Notre Dame in Jack Geiser, a linebacker who's acquired damn near 70 starts for them in his entire career. That's pretty crazy when you think about it. He would make the play, but yet again, Drew Allar got bailed out as they would call pass interference on a different defender. This one was a bit more controversial. I did not see defensive pass interference on that play at all. Like, quite literally. That play saw Drew Allar try to throw it up to Tyler Warren. Yeah, you're not surprised about that. This nigga threw it in damn near quadruple coverage. You're asking to turn the ball over in that situation. Like, if anything, they are accounting for trying to guard him. And with the way that he was guarded, if we can get real technical about this, the ball was underthrown. If all three of those potential defenders had a chance at the ball, and one managed to turn around and adjust, it was underthrown. Wasn't even remotely catchable for him at that point in time. So how does that even remain pass interference at that point? I don't know. But again, once more, similar case to last drive, Nick Singleton would get another 7-yard rushing touchdown and his third of the night to give Penn State a 7-point lead going into the middle of the fourth quarter. Notre Dame needed a drive, though. And a drive they would eventually get. Jarian Price would actually lose yardage on the first play, but Jordan Greathouse would get 17 combined receiving yards over the next couple before closing well, giving them another first down. And then Riley Leonard would get the ball out of the backfield to Jeremiah Love. This guy, this man is ridiculous, bro. Like, Riley Leonard would pick up a first down, and then on the first rushing attempt he hurdles another player in another game. Now, he had suffered a knee injury, and he was also said to have had the flu at some point. But nonetheless, for, trying to get the knee to heal up, he had a brace on. And he literally told people that he wasn't going to hurdle in the game at all. He's going to try to avoid it. Then you have this man, Jeremiah Love, going completely up and over the likes of Kobe King, attempting to make the tackle on this short run, just completely exposing him, man. You don't have to keep doing people like this. They said that this is the 6th game he had a hurdle in this season alone. Like, I don't know why people keep falling for it. So you're just going to continue to go low, knowing that this man can elevate time and time and time again whenever he fucking wants to, honestly. Like, again, he has a fucking brace on. He's not even at full strength, and he manages to get up that high over you, dude. You just make yourself look foolish. And if that wasn't bad enough, on the very next play, the entire defense would look foolish. Now, Jaden Greathouse was covered on this play, but he completely broke the damn defender. Slipped down immediately, and Jaden Greathouse was given an open shot to work with. Surely enough, Riley Leonard would get him the ball. Jaden Greathouse had to work in space, and he made another defender miss en route to a 54-yard touchdown catch that would tie up the ball game. Now it was going to be who could make the right plays at the right moments. It would certainly come down to that here. This is premier clutch time. Penn State would be focused on shutting down as much clock as possible. Too bad that they were not even remotely effective in their play calling. They gained just 7 yards during this stretch. To Notre Dame's credit, they did move the ball a little bit, trying to do a similar thing, taking 1 minute and 47 seconds off the clock as well, while forcing Penn State to eventually use a timeout, and then punting the football. But it all came down to these past couple drives here. Now, Nick Singleton would do good work and actually run for a 13-yard gain and give them another first down. And then 2 timeouts to work with, 38 seconds. And James Franklin made the horrible mistake of trusting Drew Allar in the clutch. This man decided, in watching in post, I saw too that a check down to Nick Singleton was developing. As much of a check down merchant as he is, he had this, keep in mind, because the defender covering him hesitated just a little bit. He could have gotten that over the top. Instead, the man decides to throw late over the middle across his body. And multiple analysts alluded to this being the golden rule for quarterbacks. You never do it. You never do it. Drew Allar tried it, and what happened subsequently? He threw an interception to Christian Gray of Notre Dame's defense, giving Notre Dame easy field position to work with. All they had to do was get the football down into Mitch Jeter's range and get it on the hash that he preferred. They would do just that. And on that field goal attempt, would curve just a little bit to the right, but it came back in, ultimately, for the game-winning field goal. Notre Dame would get this 27-24. they would be awaiting the winner of last night's matchup. But we'll get to that in just a second. Riley Leonard, to his credit, 2 total touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 223 passing yards. It wasn't the hottest of starts, but he was able to lean on his team, trust his team, and ultimately rein in some productive drives in the second half of ball to get them to victory. It shouldn't go unnoticed, though, and even Riley Leonard gave him his flowers here. Steve Angeli's drive started something. It started something. It gave Notre Dame some light. You just needed a drive, one drive, to see if you could really pull this thing off. And the fact that as a backup quarterback with very few snaps played throughout the season, he was able to come in and lead them to a field goal pretty much immediately in a dire situation. You have to credit him with that. The rushing was very ineffective in terms of yards per carry. I mean, just 2.8 ain't nothing to write home about. But in terms of the volume, 41 rushes, 116 yards, and the sheer amount of time that all of these runs took, the sheer amount of energy it took to stop them, that's where their effectiveness really came in. Jaden Greathouse had a career game, 7 receptions and 105 yards for him with a touchdown. And then Aeneas Williams had 5 receptions for 66 yards on the night. As for Penn State, man. How do I even get into this, bro? How do I even get into this? Okay, so Drew Allar's just not very good. And if y'all don't seem to understand it at this point, I really don't know what to say. Multiple people on these broadcasts talking about his 50 overall touchdowns and just 9 interceptions over the course of his first 2 seasons as Penn State's starter. And yet, in every single big game, he happens to crumble. Need I remind you of the multiple games in these past couple of seasons against Ohio State? Or any big matchup against a ranked opponent, or even Michigan in his case. He struggled in their match against them as well. This is very known for Drew Allar. Of most people. And it feels like this game right here, on a national stage, when you absolutely needed to make a play, and just not even necessarily get it all in one play with such a deep pass. Like I said, you literally had Singleton out in the flat. It had been working to some level of effectiveness for you over the course of the night. Just get it out to him, see what happens. You're trying to secure a win. You don't need to get that risky and play the hero ball. And yet those tendencies may have very well shed some light for people who still, coming into this game, didn't want to believe that there were deficiencies in Drew Allar's game, if any at all. Let me just tell you something, man. So, the box score here would state that he was 12 of 23 for 135 yards and that last interception on the night. Very subpar for a quarterback that's supposed to be good. To an extent, it's understood. I mean, you're leaning on your run game. and you're throwing short passes all night long, so naturally you're not going to have the flashiest of numbers. And that could be excused if you're trying to protect the football and not be reckless. And again, in the worst possible moment, he did just that. But it gets even worse than that, because after the game, there would be multiple graphics breaking down his pass distribution by receiving group. Oh boy. Tight ends on the night with the likes of Luke Reynolds, Tyler Warren, obviously, and then Dinkins would all combine for 9 total catches, and he was most effective there, obviously. 9 total catches amongst all of them for 103 total yards. Running backs in this game combined for 3 catches and 39 total yards in this game. But wait. How in the hell did he finish a game with 135 passing yards if he managed to get 143 combined yards to the 5 players he targeted in the game? You have to ask yourself, right? And then we get to the distribution to the wide receivers on the night. The man, I kid you not, would not complete a single pass to a wide receiver on the night. Would throw an interception on the final play of their game that would lead to the game-winning field goal. And despite that, they would still have a chance. -3 yards. 0 of 4. -3 yards and an interception when targeting wide receivers on the night. How? How, bro? How? I need to understand. It is so laughably terrible. I don't know. You're not going to live that down if you are Drew Allar or if you're a general Penn State fan. I'm sorry. Like, what? That's absurd, bro. That's crazy. Literally, a check down merchant. I get it. So you mean to tell me, though, that you managed to lose yardage while not even netting any single wide receiver target a catch on the night? You lose yardage. That is insanity to me. It is fucking crazy. If there is no better representation of how inconsistent and underwhelming that Drew Allar can be, despite the talents that he may possess. I'm not going to sit here and say that he is just completely devoid of skill. That would be ridiculous. That would be generational hatred. I'm not saying that at all. He's definitely got skills. He's definitely got the talent. But he definitely underwhelms in the biggest fucking moments. There is no better representation of that than him managing to make a position group lose yardage when you didn't even get them the ball over the course of the entire night. Like, literally, you look at the box score And no receiver here is credited with any yardage or any catch at all. And you still lose fucking yards? You gotta make it make sense at some point, man. That's horrible. That's horrible. And it gets even worse as in terms of win percentage, James Franklin, with his 1-18 record against AP top 5 AP competition, is the third worst in NCAA football history, behind the likes of Frank Beamer, and then a coach that I'm not too familiar with, but he went all 15 in such AP top 25 ranked games. Like, to James Franklin's credit, though, I'll give him some slack for this. He did fine. He did fine. His fatal flaw is trusting Drew Allar too much. And as a coach, you kind of have to invoke that trust in him. If you as a coach aren't going to express faith in your quarterback and you're leading not just him, but an overall group of young men, how are you going to expect those young men and players to then have that faith in their leader of the team in terms of players? You can't expect them to rally behind him if you aren't going to be his biggest advocate as a head coach. You gotta take that for what it is. It's tough, but he's right in having faith in Drew Allar, and you should. He coached a fine game. I'll give him that. At the end of the day, that's on Drew Allar. He has to make the smart decision there. You either throw it to Singleton or you throw it out, getting out of the tackle box, obviously. If you're going to throw it that deep, make him your nearest eligible receiver and just throw it out. Don't throw it directly to his feet. In that situation, wait over the middle across your body. That is completely on Drew Allar. But I will get on James Franklin for trying to talk smack to fucking Marcus Freeman, talking about some no offense to coach, but I think everybody should be in a conference. And then you proceeded to get beaten by the only CFP squad in this first ever playoff format, who is an independent school. Just terrible. It aged so terribly, so fast. Like, to an extent, I understand it. That they're not necessarily going to have quite the path as most other people would through a traditional conference championship. And so, being in a sort of pseudo conference by themselves with the likes of Army and UConn, I get it. But, bro, you shouldn't have said anything. You shouldn't have said anything. That's all I'm gonna say. That's going to be used against you. Like, you in a Big Ten school couldn't manage to beat an independent squad. And you're so desperate for them to get in a conference, you desire it that much? What's going to happen if they enter the Big Ten? And you have to face them again. You gonna be ready for that time? That's just thought. Their rushing game again, though, to Penn State's credit, was strong. They had 204 total yards on the night and the 3 touchdowns by Nick Singleton. Like, they did, to an extent, control the line of scrimmage in that regard. But by that point, too much momentum got on the side of Notre Dame, and Penn State faltered at the worst moments of time. They had won the turnover margin But the one that they had on the night lost in their season, effectively. Good win by Notre Dame, though. Once more, they would be awaiting the results of last night's game. Ohio State and Texas. A lot of storylines prevalent here. Most notably, you have Ewers making his CFP semifinal debut and trying to seek out a bid to his first national championship appearance as a quarterback by facing off against his former team, including the likes of his former roommate in Jack Sawyer. Obviously, Ewers was an Ohio State Buckeye before transferring, as C.J. Stroud started to develop more and more. On the other side, you have Will Howard, during his time in K-State, being 0-3 against Texas, and also being the only team in the Big 12 Conference that he had lost to over the course of his tenure there. So a lot was on the line. Someone was going to have to cast aside those demons of the past in order to move on to a prosperous future in the regard of contending for a national championship. Now, Texas, knowing that Ohio State during the course of the CFP has been quite notable for getting off to hot starts, would feel the heat already. Matthew Golden would get involved pretty early and get a nice 24-yard catch, but they would stall out for just a little bit as they could not really get the run game going after Ryan Wingo's 6-yard run, though. They would get to 4th and short in OSU territory, and they decided to go for it. Because again, you're trying to sustain drives here, and that was going to be the key for Texas. You're not trying to allow Ohio State's offense to get out to that hot of a start again. And especially with you having to work back against the likes of Arizona State last week, you couldn't really afford that defensively. You had to try and at least give them a fighting shot in this race. So again, I respect the idea of going for it, but they wouldn't get it, turning the ball over on downs and giving Ohio State good field position to work with, where instantly you saw the rushing attack getting involved just a little bit with the likes of Quinshon Judkins. And then Will Howard would throw some fucking dimes, man. Emeka Egbuka would get a solid catch. Colonel Tate would get a solid catch over the middle of the field. Even this dropped pass by Jeremiah Smith was a pretty good pass. He threw it to where only he could get it. He just couldn't make the play. You would have another pair of catches by the likes of Emeka Egbuka just holing in some very, very contested ones. Then a Colonel Tate drop, again, in the end zone off of a sort of read option slant. It was right in his hands. He dropped it. That's tough. It is what it is. But on the very next play, Quinshon Judkins would show off his elusive ability, despite how many people seem to believe that just isn't the case in real life. He definitely has the capability of doing that. But he would get in from 9 yards out to give Ohio State a 7-0 lead and make it to where in the first quarter of all of these CFP games, they have outscored teams 42-0. That would stand after Texas, despite a pair of first down catches from the likes of DeAndre Moore Jr. and Ryan Wingo, would stall out yet again and be forced to punt from OSU's 48-yard line. Now, on this next drive, you would see them get out to relatively the same thing. Jeremiah Smith would get a catch for 3 yards. Colonel Tate would get a first down catch. And then Travion Henderson would get out for a great, and I mean great carry on 2nd and 8. Kind of a sweep, but it's going directly to the running back. he would get 22 yards on it. And that wasn't before Quinshawn Judkins threw a very good block out in the flats to get Travion Henderson more space to work with. G. Scott Jr. would get another first down catch. And then after a very short run by Travion Henderson, here's where the trouble would begin when it comes to penalties, as he would get an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that would push the offense back and make the second and very long kind of difficult to overcome. Then it became 3rd and 26, and ultimately, after just picking up 5 yards, the offense would be forced to punt to open up the second quarter. Credit to both defenses here, as Ohio State was getting directly on Quinn Ewers' ass. But with Ohio State, there were multiple plays, like yet again, despite getting a first down, you would have yet another situation where penalties played a factor. However, it was a back and forth of bouts between two of the best defenses in the nation. I mean, quite literally, you could argue, and it was stated, and I could agree, that as the game settled in, Texas did start to gain a lot more confidence on that end. Whatever doubts they had seemed to dissipate for the better part of this second quarter. Like, the offense was getting in their own way. They were all rattled now, exactly where the defense wanted them, and they compounded on it more often than not. But to Ohio State's and their defense's credit, Texas still couldn't really get anything going. However, that would change after this next Ohio State punt, and on a drive that saw the Texas defense get their very first sack on a man who has not really been sacked during the past 6 games, including the entirety of the CFP, really. Like, they have done a great job of protecting Will Howard, despite the fact that there are so many backup offensive linemen in here and linemen that aren't even playing their true positions right now. Well, they've been more than holding their own. A sack was going to be given up at some point, though. You would have Texas try to mount a drive here. And to be honest, it was a good start for Ohio State on 2nd and 10, as Sonny Styles Jr. would actually take it upon himself, and on a pass to Gunnar Helm, hit him well enough to the point where it was an incomplete pass. Now, they were trying to await for targeting, and it just was not. Wasn't forcible contact to the head or neck area at all. He might have hit his head on the ground. That's a completely different story. But no. Later on this drive, though, you would get Quinn Ewers taking it upon himself to scramble out in open space. Now, he's not necessarily a mobile quarterback, but the fact that he took it upon himself to try to extend the drive, knowing the stakes, recognizing the magnitude of a potential drive here, he took a multitude of hits there, ended up just short. And in came Arch Manning on this 4th down, who would get a very good 8-yard run on a good fake to an inside run, taking it outside and getting down. Now, there was a little bit of review here. They were checking to see if he had fumbled maybe, and he, upon further review, still had control of the very front of the football, even if the back of the ball was kind of freed from his arm. At that point, he was down, so they gave it to him. I couldn't really hit on that. Then you would have Slade Bolton breaking off a tackle attempt and eventually picking up 24 yards. Now, it was relatively smooth sailing for Texas. Out in the flat, you would have one of their premier running backs in the likes of Jaden Blue getting out in the flat with Sonny Styles Jr. guarding him. He had a step on him, though, and ultimately he would get in from 18 yards out for the touchdown to tie up the ball game. After all that good work on defense and also a pretty good drive from their offense, they seem to have the momentum on their side going into the second half. And then Ohio State's offense would elect to activate themselves. You see, there's a reason why the terminology is Ohio State offense. Literally. Sometimes it can be methodical. Traditional, driving the ball down the field with dinks and dunks here and there can be drawn out, for sure. But there have been too many times over the years where you will see just a single play take place and allow the Buckeyes offense to break free completely within just one or two plays and within such a short amount of time. And that changed things up a little bit. That shook things up a little bit. Because on the very first play from scrimmage, with just 29 seconds left and 2 timeouts, you would have Will Howard throw a very short screen pass to Travion Henderson. Now, the Texas defense was in full prevent formation. Every single D-back you could think of was backed up completely. Most everyone was off of the line. But Travion Henderson has a great balance of power and is known as a speed guy for a reason. So as everybody was converging in, this man ran through the lane given to him perfectly. And at that particular point, he was gone. On a very short pass, albeit that came behind the line of scrimmage, he took it upon himself to run for a 75-yard touchdown catch out of the backfield. Damn near untouched. Texas defense might have at most gotten a hand on him. He didn't feel that shit if that was the case. And ultimately, despite Texas's best efforts on both sides of the ball, they would still be down at halftime 14-7 going into the half, giving Ohio State as well a chance to ride even more momentum because they would get the ball to start up the next half. But with such a dire situation on hand, you have Texas's defense step up yet again. After an Emeka Egbuka catch and a pair of 7-yard runs from Travion Henderson, Will Howard would get intercepted by David Benda, who would give Texas good field position to work with. Despite that, they got a good catch from Quintrevion Wisner out of the backfield, but could not run the football. Still, that stalling out their drive, and they would have to punt it again. Texas's defense remained on deck, though. And on 3rd and 1, with a chance to run it up the middle, I guess, you would have them decide to run a pitch play to the outside for some reason, which I didn't completely understand. Certainly an unorthodox play call, but they would have to punt the ball after that. And then Texas would take 72 yards in 5 minutes and 18 seconds off the clock. helped by multiple third down conversions. They were very inefficient on third down leading up to this drive and decided to go 4 for 4 on this particular drive on third down. And it was not just Quinn Ewers necessarily just being stagnant. He was making some very great decisions on the fly. This pass to Quintrevion Wisner only came after he just managed to get a sort of shovel pass to him out of the backfield without him even so much as looking completely in his direction. It was kind of a no-look play. And that saved their drive. He would do it yet again with the likes of Quintrevion Wisner getting multiple rushes for yardage to pick up first downs. Wasn't necessarily effective overall, but it was doing enough at the right moments to keep the defense on their toes. And then ultimately, on this fourth third down of this drive, you would have Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense run the same exact play as they did to get the touchdown at the end of the first half. Only this time, Sonny Styles wasn't really guarding him. He elected to blitz, and this time, it was wide open. Uncontested, Jaden Blue walked in for a 26-yard touchdown to top the ball game at nearly the end of the third quarter. Now, Ohio State would have another drive to work with to close out the third quarter, but they would stall out yet again with yet another penalty and even a sack fumble that lost some yardage, though it was recovered by Will Howard. Texas, despite them not being at the peak of their powers, they were exactly what they wanted to be entering into the fourth quarter. A competitive ball game. Not one they got too on a hand too early to where you had no chance at all to win it. You wanted to be in this particular spot right here. That being said, Ohio State defense would hold up, as after a 7-yard run from Wisner, they would stuff him in the backfield for a negative catch, and then force an incomplete pass. Now, it was thrown over the top of Matthew Golden just a little bit to where it was out of reach. Ultimately, they would have to punt the ball yet again. And then Ohio State, understanding what was at stake here, the second national championship appearance for Ryan Day under his tenure, a winning record in the CFP, they got down to it immediately. They got some short passes to G. Scott Jr. before getting an 18-yard catch to Carnell Tate to pick up a first down. Quinshawn Judkins would then get another short catch to pick up a first down, and then a solid run getting them into territory before another penalty pushed them back. Yet, on this third down, you have G. Scott Jr., despite the defense being directly on it, as all of the other three receivers in trips formation cleared out, to have this sort of in route to G. Scott Jr. He muscled off the defense just enough to pick up 7 yards on the play, despite having the potential to be stopped way shorter the line of game than that. And so on 4th and 2, with Texas calling their timeout, it was decision time. Ohio State had notably been one of the most effective teams on 4th down throughout the season. Would they rely on it here, or would they elect to get Texas the ball back? Or do they even trust Fielding to have enough strength to kick the field goal from this far out? They would ultimately decide to go for it. And they would call a smart play, having Will Howard take a sort of power run up the left side of the field to pick up the first down. Now, he could have had a touchdown. I will say that, but he slipped and fell somehow, akin to Daniel Jones. Like, it was so bad. They noted that his parents were in the stands, and they had them laughing at him That's tough. Even with all that being said, you're going to take these plays. Mega Buka would get a solid 8-yard catch and run. And then the rest of the drive saw the likes of Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard combined for runs, with Judkins finishing it off from a single yard out to cap off a 7-minute and 45-second drive that saw them log 13 plays and take up 88 yards. Backed into a corner, season on the line, they got down to business. But once more, as it had come down to in multiple games throughout the course of the season, it was going to be on their defense to come through. And to be honest, for a while, it was looking as though the defense was going to falter a little bit. You had Jaden Blue get an 8-yard run to pick up a first down. You had Gunnar Helm get a 34-yard catch to pick up another first down, actually managing to stiff arm Caleb Downs and then taunting him, pushing them back a little bit. But with the enforcement of that, the yardage still counted. Backed up on OSU's 40-yard line, Golden would take it upon himself to get another 27-yard catch. And just like that, they were right in Ohio State's red zone. Then, to add even more insult to potential injury here, after a couple of productive plays from their running backs, you would have Ohio State get multiple pass interference penalties on the likes of Lathan Ransom and Matthews Jr., giving Texas a goal-to-go situation to work with. Should be easy enough. First down comes in, and they stop Gibson directly in his tracks. Second down comes in. You would think that they would try to continue to run the football up the middle. And I'm not going to lie, that's probably what Texas's offense was expecting too. So I get trying to deceive the defense in that manner. But they chose to call a pitch play way to the outside for Wisner. And let's just say that their thoughts were wrong. The pursuit was there completely. Caleb Downs got there to slow him down, and Lathan Ransom would eventually get in the backfield to slow him down and tackle him for a 7-yard loss, making this goal-to-go situation even more difficult for a Texas offense that had all the pressure on them with the fact that Ohio State had taken so much time off with their drive. On third down, an incomplete pass would be thrown by Quinn Ewers to Ryan Wingo. And then it all came down to this. On fourth down, game on the line, season on the line, and Jack Sawyer, the Ohio native, who has been a part of the Ohio State program for pretty much a good portion of this decade now. He is a senior. He's entering the NFL draft this season. He takes it upon himself to finish the job, as far as this particular game goes. He would sack his former roommate in Quinn Ewers and force a fumble that he recovered and took 83 yards to the house for the game-sealing touchdown. Just like that, they're up 28-14. Texas would get another shot, but again, Quinn Ewers would get intercepted by Caleb Downs. It was a matter of desperation, though. I mean, you're trying to get down the field as fast as you possibly can. You're not going to necessarily worry about making the best of decisions. You're just trying to move the ball. Ultimately, Caleb Downs worked them very well. And Ohio State would take out the rest of the game to get the 28-14 victory against 5-seed Texas. I'm going to say it right now, Quinn Ewers had a great game. So, to group him in with Drew Allar is just bold and not very wise, in my opinion. Now, what I will say is that him being 4 of 14 when it came to contested targets or so, I think uncontested targets, 4 of 14 passing in that situation could have certainly improved. And that leaves a little to be desired. I will admit that. But when it came down to it, Texas, when it felt like they were out of the game, he stepped his ass up completely and made a multitude of plays that kept this game close and competitive enough for Texas to have a chance, at the very least. Nothing more, though, I guess, when it comes to all the punts. All those signs of stalling out may have eventually come back to haunt them here. Nonetheless, still, despite all of that, he was in very good range to make it happen. You cannot control a sack fumble, especially given the assignment of the blindside blocker to pick up Jack Sawyer and then just completely deny him as he was distracted by the likes of Cody Simon crashing in as well. Perfect loop blitz. The perfect loop blitz. And just a bad read by his lineman. That play is about that, and Jack Sawyer also crashing the party more so than it is about Quinn Ewers not showing up in a big moment. He definitely did. And we saw that time and again in this game. Unlike his counterpart in Drew Allar, leaning on the likes of Singleton and such, and the rushing attack, rather than doing these things on his own will, creating the good play for himself. Not to mention that he's aided by the likes of Tyler Warren as well. Like, Ewers has had good players on this team, obviously. He's not devoid of talent here. But he was spreading the ball around to everyone. I mean, their leading receiver was Jaden Blue, out of the backfield for that matter. Isaiah Bond was out due to injury. That could have changed up the scheming, and yet he still found a way to be productive enough on offense to get them just an opportunity. But ultimately, history is going to remember you for closing it out. I understand. As for Ohio State, though, would have Will Howard get his first ever win against Texas in his college career, logging a touchdown and an interception on 72.7% completion and 289 passing yards. The offense had 82 rushing yards, though neither offense was really good at running the ball, and I guess they didn't have to be given the situation. Carnell Tate will lead all receivers in the game with 87 receiving yards on 7 catches. Trevion Henderson will have the aforementioned 75-yard touchdown catch, and Emeka Egbuka will have 51 yards receiving on 5 catches. Yes, Jeremiah Smith, you see, that catch for 3 yards to start off the second drive was the only catch he had. And he was barely targeted. You have to understand, though, Texas decided to shift their coverage specifically for Jeremiah Smith. They were that scared of getting beaten over the top by the likes of him. They had seen enough film on him in these past couple of games alone, and not to mention what he's been able to accomplish this season so far, to where they couldn't get beaten like that. They wanted to make Ohio State conform to a different brand of football, to where they're not necessarily getting beat by him. They decided to have a safety over the top of Jeremiah Smith at all times. even in situations where they bluffed the blitz. Like, for example, they had Michael Taffy on a specific third down play late in the game, bluff the blitz, and then sprint all the way back up over the top to try to shadow Jeremiah Smith. And they also had a cornerback on him at every time, even in situations where it wasn't full man-on-man coverage, even in zone. You're not giving Jeremiah Smith the ball. He's not going to be the player that beats this Texas team on this particular night. And it didn't really have to be that way, to be honest. As close as it got. And I would just say that could be a problem. Seeing as Notre Dame will be facing off against Ohio State in the national championship on January the 20th. It's going to be a great matchup, I would say. You have both of these historically great programs. They're two of the winningest programs in college football history. They have a rich history of national championship titles as well. Now, Notre Dame has won one a lot. It's been a long time coming for Notre Dame winning one compared to Ohio State getting theirs in 2014, as the last national championship for Notre Dame came in 1989 under Lou Holtz's tenure as head coach for Notre Dame. Obviously, Lou Holtz is probably going to have a lot to say about this matchup. But let's just keep in mind that under Marcus Freeman, they have been 0-2 against Ohio State in not just the 2022 season opener, but also week 2 of 2023 college football season as well. Back-to-back years, did not win. Now, the second one came down to one of the craziest final drives imaginable, led by Kyle McCord, who just elected to enter the NFL draft recently. He's definitely going to be a later round pick. He may go undrafted, but he'll probably find a way to produce for any team that he goes on. As far as the overall series history goes, Ohio State is 6-2 against Notre Dame, winning their last 6 matchups, including 3 straight, at least in times that I've actually tuned in to those games. I vividly remember the 2016 Fiesta Bowl that Ohio State ended up winning 44-28. This game is certainly going to be different. Like, the stakes here are probably the highest that you can possibly get in a college football setting, obviously. And I mean, hey, I'm not going to go ahead and say that there's going to be a blowout. But what I am telling you is that I would believe that both teams would be prepared very thoroughly for this matchup. In this part 3 between Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman in their respective tenures against each other. And speaking of sequels and such, like I said, this is just the first chapter in this particular decade of Ohio State versus Texas, now that they've gotten another win against them, because they face off against each other in the season opener. So we just gonna see. Is Quinn Ewers still gonna be there? Is Arch Manning still gonna be there? We'll see how things develop. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.